show.
Welcome to episode 90 of the Gluttons For Punishment Podcast, or GFP, a Toronto Maple Leafs and NHL podcast hosted by Michael Lepore and Anthony Bruno. He's Lepore, I'm Bruno. Thank you so much for listening and watching us on YouTube as well. As of January 24th, 2023, the Leafs are still in second place in the Atlantic Division, trailing the juggernaut Boston Bruins. The Leafs right now playing at a 113-point pace. Since our last podcast, they had a big win over the Winnipeg Jets, a brutal overtime loss to the Montreal Canadiens, but followed that up with an impressive 5-2 win over the New York Islanders. So we are going to go over the week that was for the Leafs and give you our thoughts and opinions on everything that went down with this team. We are also going to talk about the goaltending situation with Ilya Samsonov and Matt Murray. And then we are going to talk trade deadline. Should the Leafs trade Matthew Knies and their first round pick to improve at this year's trade deadline? So I promise you're going to want to stay tuned until the very end of this episode. But before we get into all that, it is officially time to welcome in my partner in crime, Mr. Michael Lepore. How you doing, man?
I'm doing very well, Anthony Bruno. In fact, I am doing absolutely spectacular because my San Francisco 49ers are going to the NFC Championship game. What a weekend it was. And it always makes it extra special to beat America's team, the Dallas Cowboys. Episode 90 of the Gluttons For Punishment Podcast. No Leaf in the history of the organization has ever donned the number 90. When I run into a situation like this, I'll look up other players from other teams who maybe wore the number 90 so I can potentially give a shout out. Ryan O'Reilly, Marcus Johansson, number 90 isn't the most popular number in the history of the league. But as we've said before about certain numbers on the pod, it's a cool number. I mean, I almost think anything that involves a 9 is pretty good. But maybe we'll see a 90 soon on the Leafs. And hopefully it's a really good player.
Ooh, Ryan O'Reilly. Could he be coming to the Leafs?
Oh, I was kind of hinting at that, Bruno, but we'll see. That's for later.
Yeah, no, I love it, man. And shout out to your San Francisco 49ers who beat the Dallas Cowboys. A lot of people, they compare our Toronto Maple Leafs to the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, I see it. And I'm a Knicks fan too. So I always say, yeah, the Knicks are kind of like the Leafs, all the money in the world, but can never accomplish anything.
So sad, man. But this is the year. Yeah. As I've said for the last 6 years.
We're talking about the 49ers, or the
Leafs are finally going to break
I'm being
through.
funny. I knew what you were talking about. Yeah.
I mean, it seemed like Dallas was going to maybe break through. I did like the 49ers this weekend, and I am happy for you and your team. But after they beat the Bucks in the wild card round, you thought maybe this is the year for the Dallas Cowboys where they slay their demons, get to the NFC Championship game, get to the Super Bowl, but not meant to be.
You know what's funny? I pretty well analyzed it like how I'd analyze the Leafs. Being neutral here, I was pretty confident the 49ers were going to win. Like, I thought we may, in fact, kill them. But as much as I thought that the 49ers were going to win, I thought Dallas was going to lose. I'm like, they just won't get it done. They're not going to go into San Francisco on the road in the playoffs and get a W. So they made a lot of mistakes. The 2 picks, those plays at the end, kind of proved my theory right, because like the Leafs, it always seems to go that way.
All right, Lepore, let's talk about the Dallas Cowboys of the NHL now, the Toronto Maple Leafs, who are still playing really well. Like I said right off the top of this podcast, since our last show, they have 2 wins and an overtime loss, an impressive 4-1 win over Winnipeg. They always find a way to lose to the Habs. I don't know what it is, especially at the Bell Center. They always seem to struggle there, and it always seems to be these tight games that, 1-goal games, overtime games. It's just the worst. But they followed that up with a statement 5-2 win over the New York Islanders. They went down 1-0 after 1, but just absolutely turned on the Jets in the second and third period and ran the Islanders out of the building. So, Lepore, what are your thoughts on what we saw, against the New York Islanders? And even if you want to touch on anything that happened in the 2 games prior to that.
As we often say on this show, Bruno, the Toronto Maple Leafs are predictable. And we saw over the last 2 games, we saw the good, and in fact, we saw the bad. It was you on this podcast last week who said, throw some money at the Montreal money line versus the Leafs because it's Saturday night in Montreal. It's going to be a tight game. And I was having this conversation with someone else before the game saying, it doesn't matter where these two teams are in the standings. It doesn't matter what they're playing for. It doesn't matter what injuries there are. It's going to be an exciting game. It just always plays out that way because that crowd's incredible in Montreal. They want to win. The players know they want to win. And those young players who got called up, they're going to be pumped, and especially to be playing on Hockey Night in Canada. So I wasn't shocked at all. I also wasn't shocked that Anderson scored because that's what he does against
he turns into prime Eric Lindros when he faces the Leafs. It's insane.
Unreal. Lock it in. Lock in the bet for an Anderson goal every time the Leafs play the Habs. So they got a point out of it. I mean, people were freaking out at that game, but I knew it. We've touched on previously about how these are kind of like the dog days of the season, and you're playing a weak team. And that's not an excuse. That's just me saying that's what happens to these teams. They just kind of dial out once in a while. And even more embarrassing with the Leafs blew a 2-0 lead. And those what ifs of the game when it was 2-0, Matthews fed Kerfoot right in front of the net, wide open net, just put it in, and he hits the post. So I'm pretty confident that had the Leafs gone up 3-0, they would have cruised to victory. But we're not that lucky. And big ups to Montreal for upsetting their rival on Saturday night at home. And Cole Caulfield done for the season. That's big news for them. So if they weren't already in full tank for Connor Bedard mode, I think all Montreal Canadiens fans are rejoicing that they are now because, hell, why not?
You know what's crazy? How they are in tank mode, obviously. And now they're going to go into super tank mode without Caulfield. But they put the tank on the shelf for one night when the Leafs come into town because they give it everything they got to beat Toronto. It's unbelievable.
And even fans will be happy. And we went through it the year we tanked for Matthews. It's that weird thing of you're cheering for your team to lose. For Montreal fans, I'm sure they're in that boat. But when they're playing Toronto, this is the one we'll get 2 points. The one of every 7 or 8 games we'll get a win. So, but I mean, that's life as a Toronto Maple Leafs fan. As I said, a lot of predictability from this team this week. Last night's game versus the Islanders, slow start, bad first period. We've seen it too many times from this team. But on the other end of it, this is the best second period team in hockey. And that's exactly what they showed us in that second period. The Järnkrok, Tavares, Nylander line just lit it absolutely the fuck up. Nylander looked amazing. That pass he made to Järnkrok, incredible. What a play.
That lob pass was so
amazing.
Filthy.
Like flashbacks of Erik Karlsson's pass to Hoffman. I don't think it was as good as that, or it wasn't as good as that one, but I mean, maybe it's where he got the idea from his countryman. But great second period. And I thought Sammy played well again. I was shitting on Sammy a few shows back saying, you know what, we're done here. Murray's the starter. I thought Samsonov looked bad. And even though he was putting up decent numbers, Samsonov, that is, I didn't think he looked too confident. And I thought it was more of a case of pucks just hitting him rather than him actually making saves. So even those games that he was winning, I wasn't really and truly convinced that he was the real deal. Now, I'm not going to put a 5-star stamp on him now and say he is the real deal, but even beyond playing well, the numbers are there. But what's different now is I find he looks confident. He looks calm, and that was not there before. And we saw more of it last night. He came in relief against Florida, made 11 saves, did not allow a goal. And then he played the Jets game, played very well. I thought he played well against Montreal. That second period, for us, funny how I just said the second period is our best period. It was a disaster against Montreal, and he played very, very well. And then last night played well again. So happy with it. Nothing to complain about from Sammy.
Yeah, it's been great to see how he has rebounded after that string of about 5 or 6 games where it seemed like he couldn't stop a puck to save his life. So he's back on track. Murray has obviously been struggling a little bit. Shout out William Nylander, Michael Lepore. This dude has been unbelievable. Snubbed from the All-Star game. Marner and Matthews are going to be going representing the Leafs. But Nylander, I mean, this guy is so deserving of an All-Star nod this season, and it's so sad that he's not going to be there because he leads the team with 26 goals, 56 points. He's tied with Marner. in points. Had a 4-point night against the Islanders, was buzzing all over the ice. He has taken his game to another level this season, and I always knew he had it in him. I feel like on numerous shows since we started this thing, we're now 90 episodes in, I always said Nylander has that extra gear. He has like a 90 to 100-point season in him at one point. And right now, he's on pace for around 96 points.
Shit.
He has been so good. And there's been so many times this year where he has clearly, in my opinion, been the best player on the ice.
Yeah.
And it's just happening so much more often this season. In the past, there was inconsistent play. You know, there was just so much more to be desired from that guy. But now, night in and night out, he is dominating. And Sheldon Keefe made the switch. You know, the Leafs got off to a slow start, and then he puts Nylander back with John Tavares and Marner back with Austin Matthews. And as you said, the Nylander-Tavares Yarncroke line put on a show, and Nylander was the engine behind that.
Yeah, they look great. Yeah, I'm not that I made the argument, but I was giving a lot of credit to Nylander's excellent season to playing with Matthews. But then we saw last night he was amazing playing with Tavares, and that's another great player. But just the point that it wasn't exactly a case of Matthews carrying him. With regard to Nylander, I mean, he looks at two things here. Number one, this All-Star game thing, I'd like to see a list historically of who are the best players to not get the All-Star game nod. And I don't know when exactly the rule came in that you have to have a guy per team and this whole thing. As I said before, that wasn't the case when we were kids. But I'd like to see a list since that was implemented of guys who were snubbed and the kind of numbers that they were putting up when they were snubbed, because this guy's on pace for like 45 goals. He's on pace for like 100 points. It's craziness. Like, you want to see the best players there. It's an absolute joke that he's not there. I don't necessarily completely disagree with the idea that there should be one guy from each team, but maybe have some sort of exception where if there's a team where really absolutely nobody deserves to be there, that they slide someone else in. To me, I think they can have that rule. It just has to be less formal. Just kind of have the thing that, yeah, you get at least one guy from every team, but nothing cemented. So you avoid situations like this. And let's face it, fans will want to see William Nylander playing that game. If I was buying a ticket and paying big money, I want to see the best players. So that's all positive stuff on the side of William Nylander. But on the negative side, and if Maple Leafs fans are being completely honest here, deep down in our guts, because we're always full of fear, what are we thinking? This guy looks like he's playing himself off the Toronto Maple Leafs in 2 years, because the numbers he's putting up, how good he looks, him and his agent know that if he hits free agency, he is going to get a briefcase thrown at his face. And I don't know if it's going to be a number that the Leafs can match based on how their books look like and the type of money they have spread over the other talent on the roster.
Yeah, you said it, man. That's the one scary thing at this point. And we have talked about it on the show going back, maybe 5 or 10 episodes ago, where we were talking about, could the Leafs actually afford William Nylander with the way he's playing? And I know it's jumping the gun and we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but this dude is making $6.9 million, 2 years left on his contract, eligible to sign an extension the same day as Matthews, July 1st, 2023. And right now he's playing like a $10 million player.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been incredible. Now, I think the Leafs are going to make it work. I really do. And maybe that's just the Leafs fan inside of me trying to be positive, but they're going to find a way to make this work, because if they lose William Nylander, the operation's over. Even though they're still going to have Marner and Matthews. Well, you would think they're going to have Marner and Matthews. Who knows what's going to happen with John Tavares? If they lose Nylander, like, the operation might just be over, because this dude is now emerging into one of the best players in the NHL. I'm not going to say he's a top 10 or 15 player, but the way he's playing right now, like, he's right on that borderline of like being a top 20 player in the league.
Yeah.
Like, he really is. And again, going back to when this guy was a youngster, he won the MVP at the World Hockey Championships for Sweden as a 21-year-old. Yeah. He showed us what he was capable of as a 21-year-old. And now he's in his prime, on pace for a career season, 96 points, 40 to 50 goals. The dude is a star player right now, and the Leafs got to do everything in their power to keep this guy around long term.
The timing sucks because had it been a case where it was Tavares expiring next year rather than the year after and Nylander the year after, we would just kind of think that, okay, well, Tavares is going to take a pay cut. I don't think it's a hot take to say that John Tavares will continue as a Toronto Maple Leaf. And I think we could all agree, Leafs lover, Leafs hater, that he's not going to be making $11 million a year on his next contract. So if that was the timing where Tavares was going into his next contract making less money, you could just have Nylander fill in that gap with his raise. But it sucks that you have Nylander up and then Tavares a year later. Because, I mean, you're going to have to wait that year to free up that money, and you can't just give him the moon and then wait a year. There's a cap. So numbers are churning in Dubas's head, and I guess a lot plays into it. And I'd love to know the strategy on the way of the Leafs, because we all know that rule number one in this situation will be to, okay, figure out what's happening with Austin Matthews. Is Austin Matthews going to resign? Is he going to remain a Maple Leaf? If he does, I mean, that cements that. And then you do the numbers. Based on that if you can fit in Nylander. But if there's some questioning, I mean, maybe this isn't even a thing because we don't feel this way. And when I mean that, I mean you and I, that Matthews is going to walk. But if that's the case, then they can sign Nylander, right? So it'll be fun, as it always is in Leafland. But typical Leafs, this guy's got half a season left. And hopefully another season and 2 playoffs left in him. Let's try our best to enjoy it now and weep about it only when we have to.
Yeah, we'll deal with that when the time comes. The Leafs are going to have to do some gymnastics when it comes to the cap. A lot of other teams in the league are really in similar situations. So we won't get too far ahead of ourselves. We'll enjoy the moment. We'll enjoy this upcoming playoff run, no matter how long it lasts. And then we'll deal with all these contracts. It's time for a quick break because we have some breaking news. Manscaped now sells beard products. That's right. They are once again revolutionizing men's grooming with the brand new Beard Hedger Pro Kit. From a beard trim to a fresh shave, the technology behind the Beard Hedger Pro Kit allows you to shape your signature beard look. Now you can finally use Manscaped products to make your drapes match your carpet by going to manscaped.com and using our promo code GFP20 for 20% off and free shipping. Lepore, just when you thought Manscaped had done it all, now they add in some beard products.
Unbelievable, Bruno. I've been through all of the products from Manscaped, everything from the Lawnmower 4.0 to the underwear, the body wash and shampoo and conditioner, everything. And I found out they were coming out with beard products. So I usually keep it clean. Those of you on YouTube who like to look at my pretty face know I like to keep it clean. But I'm growing it out simply because I would love to give these Manscaped products a shot because I know they will be A+ all the way. Go to the Manscaped website, GFP20 for 20% off and free shipping.
It's a great product kit. So you're going to get the beard trimmer. You're going to get beard shampoo and conditioner, beard oil, beard balm. And the Pro Kit also comes with 3 free gifts: a beard brush, comb, and scissors to ensure that you are looking your absolute best. So go to manscaped.com and use our promo code GFP20 for 20% off and free shipping. That is 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com using the promo code GFP20. All right, Lepore, we got to talk about the goaltending situation.
Yeah.
We alluded to it in the first block of the show, but Ilya Samsonov right now is on fire. He has a .937 save percentage over his last 6 games. Woo. He has now started 3 games in a row, and we haven't really seen this because Sheldon Keefe has not been riding the hot hand this season for the most part. It's been back and forth between Murray and Samsonov. You know, there have been occasions where they've played a couple games in a row But now it really does seem like the Leafs are letting Samsonov run with this job. So the question I ask you is Ilya Samsonov now the unquestioned number one goalie on the Toronto Maple Leafs? And do you think he's going to be the starter in game one of the playoffs?
Ooh, that one's tougher to predict. But as we sit here right now on January 24th, you went over his numbers, Bruno. They're excellent. As we sit here right now, Ilya Samsonov is the starting goalie for the Toronto Maple Leafs. We're in a position where if the guy has a bad game or two, that can flip really quickly. But Murray hasn't exactly stolen the show either. So I don't think we can sit here and expect Murray just to come back and be good. So maybe at this point, Samsonov has earned longer of a leash than either of these goalies have had so far in the season. But he's been great, and it's goaltending. And why would you put anything into questioning? If this is the guy who's playing well, you stick with it. And maybe that was the plan with Keefe all along. Play half the season. We'll go back and forth. We'll give these guys their starts. If you remember correctly, they are like 2 off in the way of start. So they really are sharing the net. So maybe that was Keefe's plan. Give them both 20 some odd games. We'll see how it plays out. And then we'll lean on one of them and the other one's there if we need him. But if it is Samsonov, man, I'm going to say it. Here you have him on his sweetheart deal. We took him from Washington. We gambled on him. Murray was a trade. Matt Murray was a trade. We're paying him $4 million. If we see between now and between the trade deadline, slam dunk, Samsonov is having a better season, what do we do with Murray? Because the total with our goalies is not too bad with regard to how much we're paying them compared to what league averages are. It's about where it should be. And we are getting that type of goaltending. But if you can free up that $4 million, you can free up that $4 million. So is it completely out of the realm of possibility that if Samsonov cements himself as the number one goalie between now and the trade deadline, Matt Murray could be involved in a potential trade out of Toronto?
Wow. It's pretty wild to think about, but honestly, it really could be on the table just because of his contract situation and because the Leafs could use, that $4+ million to really do some damage at the trade deadline.
Yeah.
And they're already going to be able to do something because obviously Jake Muzzin is on LTIR. So they're going to have a little bit of flexibility, but if they can also free up Murray's money, that would get really interesting as well. But saying all that, Lepore, I do want to pump the brakes a little bit because there has been multiple times this season where it has seemed like Matt Murray is back. Matt Murray is the starter. Oh my God, this is the Matt Murray that we saw in Pittsburgh that won 2 Stanley Cups. And then it yo-yos back to Ilya Samsonov being the best goalie. And then it goes back and forth. Like we've seen this now at least 2 or 3 times this season where it seemed like first Matt Murray was the guy, or first Samsonov was the guy. Then it was Matt Murray. Now it's back to Samsonov, especially with Samsonov's hot start and specifically at home where he has remained an absolute monster on home ice at Scotiabank Arena. So I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. Just looking at the overall numbers, Samsonov, .920 save percentage in 21 games this season. Murray has a .911 save percentage in 19 games. So Samsonov has clearly been the better goalie through their first 20 starts. But like I said, I don't want to jump the gun because we just saw Samsonov have a pretty bad stretch not too long ago where this guy had like an .885 save percentage over like 5, 6, 7 games. And now he's obviously turned it around. Murray's going through a little bit of a rough patch right now. Looking at his numbers, his last game against Florida, 4 goals on 8 shots. He allowed 4 goals against the Boston Bruins, 5 goals on January 5th against Seattle, 4 goals against when they played the Coyotes right before the new year. So he's going through a little bit of a rough patch, but I don't think this is the end of Matt Murray. I still think he's going to turn it around, and there is value in having both of these guys in the playoffs. There really is. Now, ideally, you want to ride with just one guy in the playoffs and not have to think about it.
Yeah, you don't want that. Yeah.
I don't think we've seen the end of Matt Murray. I still think he is going to challenge to be the number one for game 1 of the playoffs.
The briefcase of $1 million if you get the question right, Anthony Bruno. Who's the starting goalie for the Maple Leafs game 1 versus the Tampa Bay Lightning?
Based on everything we've seen, and I know I just said that this is not the end of Matt Murray, but if I had to put $1 million on it, Lepore, it's Ilya Samsonov. Based on the right here and right now and what we are seeing at the moment and how well he is playing, I'm going to say it is going to be Ilya Samsonov in game 1 of the playoffs. But guess what? This could age very poorly and I could look like a complete idiot.
Yeah. As often happens with goalies, people's takes and poorly. But again, that questioning is going to be there. I'd like to see the numbers, and maybe you have an opinion on this, Bruno, how we just talked about how Murray is currently going through a rough stretch. Samsonov has gotten his head straight, but he went through a rough stretch. I'd like to see the best goalies in the league throughout the last few years. And if their save percentage was pretty consistent throughout the season, or was it a case where, they would have 2-3 bad games, average, and then maybe go 4 games where they let in like 2 goals or something, so it boosts it up? Or is it just consistently the 9-2-5 or whatever every 2-3 game sample sizes? Or maybe, the proper answer is probably that all goalies are different and it's completely random. But I'd like to see, for example, Shesterkin, Vasilevsky, Carey Price, those years where they were 1A goalies, what were their worst stretches? I'd be intrigued to see that. And then on the flip side, what were their best stretches?
Yeah, I even think back to last year. Igor Shesterkin won the Vezina, but he had a rough stretch in March. And I'm looking at his game log right now.
Fast, Anthony Bruno. You went right to it.
4 goals allowed March 10th. March 12th, very next game, 4 allowed. 3 games after that, he lets in 5, lets in 3, lets in 3. Like, there was a stretch of like 8 games where he was not playing very well at all, and he ended up winning the Vezina Trophy. So it just goes to show, even the best goalies in the league, they do go through some rough patches. Now, that was essentially only the one rough patch that Shesterkin had last season, because he ended up finishing with I believe it was like a 930 save percentage, something in that range.
Yeah, so I'd like to see what his numbers were before that stretch.
Yeah, like he ended up finishing, oh my God, he finished with a 935 save percentage.
I was going to guess 935. I knew it was in that realm. It was historically good.
Jeez. So, yeah, and that's why, like, I am not going to write off Matt Murray, and I'm sure there's a lot of people in Leafs Nation who are just saying, screw this guy. Like, he's clearly the number 2 right now. Like, let's get rid of him. But I don't think we should jump the gun, even though I am intrigued by what you said, Lepore, how the Leafs could potentially use him in a trade to free up some cap space to help them in other areas. That really, really is intriguing when you actually sit down and think about it.
How about a big blockbuster one with the Arizona Coyotes? Let's do Murray and a sweetener, maybe the 3rd round pick that Bruno's already smiling. Maybe the 3rd round pick that the Sens gave us, along with something else, and picks, prospects, whatever it takes for Vejmelka and Lawson Crouse. Ooh.
Oh, man. That's a juicy trade, especially Lawson Crouse, man. That guy's physical. He scores goals.
Yeah. Or Chychrun. Are we going to go crazy and say Chychrun? It frees up a lot of salary.
It seems like this year more than most years, and especially, the recent past, it just seems like there could be way more fireworks around this deadline for the Leafs than we have seen in recent years, because it just seems like there's so much on the line, with Dubas and Keefe, and who knows what's going to happen with their future and their contracts, how we're now in year 7 of Matthews, Marner, and Nylander. Like, they got to start doing things, or else this operation is going to get blown to smithereens. So it just really seems like we could see some real fireworks, and that brings us perfectly, Lepore, into our next topic. Because on the Fan 590 morning show today, Nick Kyprios,
love those guys,
was talking about the trade deadline and what the Leafs might have to do. And this might surprise some people. He said, if you're trying to knock off the Boston Bruins this year, you may have to throw Matthew Knies in a trade. So let's think about this for a second, Lepore. Matthew Knies is the Leafs' best prospect.
Yeah,
they stole him in the second round. And again, I hate jumping the gun on prospects. I don't want to say that this guy's going to be like a legit impact player in the NHL, but based on everything I have seen from watching his highlights and seeing scouting reports and things like that, there's a lot of buzz about this guy.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people are comparing him sort of unfairly to Austin Matthews.
Oh, come on. I haven't heard that.
I know. It's crazy, but just based on his size, based on his shot, his goal scoring ability, like you're getting some comparisons to Austin Matthews. Again, I do not want to jump the gun. I don't think he's going to be Austin Matthews. Who knows if this guy's even going to be an impact player in the league? But do you think, based on the situation the Leafs are in right now, and how, as I said, we're in year 7 of Matthews, Marner, and Nylander. Dubas right now is a lame duck GM, does not have a contract extension. Who knows what's happening with Sheldon Keefe? Should the Leafs actually trade Matthew Knies at the deadline and their first-round pick to improve and make a run for the Stanley Cup this season?
Yeah, just to touch on what you were going over with regard to prospects, nothing makes me roll my eyes more than when fans talk about their amazing prospect pool that is just better than everybody else's. I always say any player that's drafted in the NHL, especially in the first few rounds, will be a dominant player wherever they're playing before they get there. If they're in the CHL and they're a second rounder, they're going to be a superstar player in the CHL. College hockey. If you have a first round pick who's playing college hockey, yeah, he should be a really good player in college hockey. So everyone just going on rants about how good their prospects are going to be all the time. And it's always the fans of teams that aren't doing well. But with regard to Knies specifically, you can't rule it out. I mean, you can't look me in the face and tell me, and this goes even beyond the Leafs. You can't look me in the face and tell me that you're a contending team that you think has a legitimate shot to lift that silver bowl and not be willing to trade away your best prospect or your first round pick. You just can't. It's going to be, I'm going to say the cliche thing of, okay, the right deal has to be there. So it has to be a great deal that makes you hands down cemented better, but you can't rule it out. Everything is in play. And you look at the situation, not only the Leafs are in, but Tampa Bay's in, because they are going to be playing the Leafs in the first round. And the winner gets the beautiful reward of playing the Boston Bruins. You made the point about it being an exciting trade deadline compared to previous seasons. I think it's going to be a fucking space race. These teams know they're going to play each other. So you also have the aspect of getting a guy simply for the sake of the other team not getting the guy, right? And we've seen that in years past. I remember there was the year the Sens picked up Bondra because they knew they would be playing the Leafs, and they knew the Leafs wanted Bondra. And I even remember reading that Bondra wanted the Leafs. So the Sens just jumped in there and made a deal for him. So it won't shock me if you see that at all. These teams are going for it. Think of Boston, man. Think of Boston. It's so weird to see a team like the Bruins playing as well as they're playing, historically well. Like, this team is absolutely unbelievable. People often use the word juggernaut. This team is a juggernaut, but at the same time, you kind of feel like it's their last chance. And Bruins fans, if you're listening, comment down below if you think that's the case. I mean, a lot of Bruins fans who I'm friends with for the last couple of years have thought, okay, it's kind of over. This is kind of the last hurrah. And then you look at this year, and I guess it just ties into Krejci and Bergeron being where they are in their careers. But my point in all that is they're going to go for it. With these guys at this age and the type of season they're having, and how they're going to get the second wildcard team in the first round. I'm not going to call it a bye to the second round, but they should win home ice advantage throughout the playoffs. They're going to go for it. They're going to do something psychotic. Why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they? And you know, you have guys there who want to win. And even the other guys, I mean, Marchand's not young. He's been there a while. Pastrnak, they say things are progressing with regard to his contract, but who knows what happens there. The Bruins are going to go for it. We know this. Tampa Bay is 100% in win now mode. They are not fucking around in Florida. As long as John Cooper and that cast of characters is there, they're going to go for it. So the Leafs cannot completely rule out trading away Knies or their first round pick. They just can't.
I agree, because I think a lot of people are going to be quick to jump on Nick Kyprios and say, what the hell are you talking about? The Leafs can't possibly trade their top prospect. And I'll play both sides here because I do think it is important for the Leafs to keep Matthew Knies just because they have not had a lot of first-round picks over the last few years. They've had to trade some away. They haven't had those premium first-round picks because they've obviously been a really good team over the last 6 years, making the playoffs in what will now be their 7th year in a row. So I think it is important to keep guys like that in the system, develop them. The Leafs need that next wave of talent because it honestly is not looking great. The talent pool in the Marlies right now, like, sure, there's some players and there have been guys that have come and made an impact this season, guys like Pontus Holmberg, but from a top end skill level, there really isn't a lot of guys. So to keep Matthew Knies around, I think is important. And I would like to see him play on the Leafs. And maybe we actually will see him play on the Leafs once his college season is done this year.
I think we will.
And maybe he's going to be the impact player. Maybe they don't have to trade him for a top 6 forward. Maybe he comes in and he's an immediate impact player. But saying all that, I do also agree with you, Lepore, that everything is on the line here. If the Leafs are really serious about making a run, beating Tampa in the first round, beating Boston in the second round. Now, I know we're penciling Boston into the second round. We saw the Lightning get swept by the Columbus Blue Jackets the year that they finished with 128 points. So,
are you predicting the Bruins go out in the first round, Anthony Bruno?
I'm just throwing it out there. There has not been good juju on any of these President's Trophy winning teams, and especially these teams that have had these monster regular seasons. So, yeah, I'm just throwing it out there. It's not 100% set in stone.
But it's one of those things, right? Let's say they end up, and now we're going to go on this topic. They end up with Pittsburgh in the first round. I mean, I'm betting on the Bruins, but if someone told me Pittsburgh snips them in 6 or 7, I wouldn't be absolutely flabbergasted, right? It's the Pittsburgh Penguins. So.
Exactly. It's totally in play that they could lose. Now, I don't think they're going to lose, but going back to the Leafs part of this conversation, they might have to trade Matthew Knies in their first round pick. If they have a chance to get Patrick Kane or Ryan O'Reilly or Timo Meier, okay, who seems like he's going to be the big fish at the deadline. He's a hell of a player, man. And he's younger than all those guys that I mentioned.
He's
great goal scorer. He's physical. Like, that would be an absolute stallion to add to the top 6. Now, if it's gonna take Matthew Knies, a first round pick, and some other stuff to get it done, then I think you do that for a guy like Timo Meier. So I do see where Kyprios is coming from. It's definitely possible that the Leafs are going to have to part with this guy, and Leaf fans might be upset. But if they are going to get an impact player who's going to come into the top 6 and be, a 30 to 40 goal scorer and help you get over the hump, then I think the Leafs are going to have to do that. And I think a lot of it also has to do with Kyle Dubas. Like, does he pull an Alex Anthopoulos? Looking at the Toronto Blue Jays, if you're a Jays fan, do you remember what happened the year before Alex Anthopoulos left the Toronto Blue Jays? He traded the entire farm system. He did not give a shit.
Yeah.
All right. He traded everybody. And you know what? It worked out for the Blue Jays. They went on 2 really good playoff runs. They made it to the American League Championship Series in back-to-back years. Or actually, I think one of the years was it back-to-back ALCSs? I believe it was.
They lost to the Indians one year. What was the other one?
Yeah, and then they lost to Kansas City.
Okay.
So, maybe Kyle Dubas just says, screw it. I'm not going to be here. I'm throwing the kitchen sink. I'm trading all of our prospects to try and win right now. And that might happen. So Leaf fans, I would just be ready for anything to play out here at the trade deadline.
Yeah. Do you think they take the stance of they have a plan, they stick to a plan, or it's sort of a wait and react to see what the other teams do?
Kyle Dubas, based on his history, has always been ahead of it. Like, he's always made his big move early, a week, 2 weeks before the trade deadline. So I do think that the Leafs will be proactive. I don't think they're going to sit around. I think if they are targeting a player and they really like a player, I think they're going to jump in ahead of everybody else and make the deal, like I said, whether it's a week, 2, or even 3 weeks before the trade deadline.
Yeah. It's going to be a good playoffs, man. It's gonna be a great playoffs. You look at least in the East, the West, I don't know what to predict in the West. I saw a line the other day. I think the Jets were like 20-1 to win the Stanley Cup. They have among the best records in the West. Not a bad bet. But then you look at the East, and we just went over it. You finish first. Your reward is Sidney Crosby and the Pittsburgh Penguins potentially. The Lightning, wild, the Lightning and Leafs will have to go through a gauntlet. So it's gonna be the Eastern Conference playoffs are gonna be something else.
Yeah, the Eastern Conference is loaded. The Western Conference is just not very good.
Oh my god!
Just to put it plainly, looking at the Stanley Cup odds, because you got the wheels turning in my head, Lepore. Right now, the Leafs are 9-1 to win the Stanley Cup. Okay. The only teams ahead of them are Boston at 4.5 to 1, the Avalanche at 6 to 1 to repeat, Carolina 8.5 to 1, and then the Leafs are 9 to 1 to win the Stanley Cup.
If you think about it, man, we know why Colorado is where they are. They've had all those injuries, and we haven't really seen the full-blown Avalanche team yet this season. That's if someone picked the Avalanche in the West. I mean, it's kind of sounds stupid for me to say, oh, I wouldn't argue with them, but almost kind of sleeping a little bit because of where they are in the standings. And I'm saying that more in the way that as far as a bet goes, it seems kind of a no-brainer. That if I had to bet someone right now in the West, I'd pick Colorado. Just because you look at the teams that are going to be there, and we know what Colorado is at their best. So again, we talked about it before. The Leafs run to the Stanley Cup. Tampa, Boston, Carolina, and then the Colorado Avalanche.
It's wild, man. It could be like one of the craziest gauntlets that we've seen in recent memory.
But it's going to feel so good when they do it, right?
Oh, it's just, and you know what? It's going to be one of those years where it's like you don't expect them to do anything. Like Boston's playing at this historic pace. Yeah. You know, they got to face Tampa again in the first round. The Avalanche could be lurking down the road. It's going to be this year that the Leafs just shock the world.
Bruno says it. I like to ask Leafs fans this question, okay? And people are laughing at us right now, but hell, we're allowed to be fans once in a while. Someone told you, okay, the Leafs are going to win the Stanley Cup. Okay. Would you rather it be in the style that I was pointing to LA, where they just shit kicked everyone? They went up 3-0 in every series, and they ended up winning the first 3 and 5, and then they won the Stanley Cup final in 6. Jersey won 2, and then LA nipped them to win it in 6. So they just dominated it. Would you rather the Leafs win like that to kind of give the middle finger to everyone, or would you want that moment of glory of an overtime winner in a game 7? We win by like the smallest little margin.
No, because I think Leaf fans would shit themselves watching a game like that. I think Leaf fans want this team to dominate. I don't want to see any game 7s. I don't want to see any overtime game 7s. I want to see the Leafs take care of business, win a series in 6, win a series in 5, maybe throw in a sweep for the first time in forever.
You know what's funny? Here we are on this show. I was talking about our failures in game 7s over the last few years. When you said winning a series in 6, that just sounded strange. It genuinely sounded strange for me just to envision the Leafs winning a series in 5 or 6 games. But oh my God.
It's wild, man. But we still got a little bit of runway here before the playoffs begin.
Yeah.
And, you know, before you know it, though, the trade deadline is approaching. Like, we basically have like another month to go, and then things are really, really going to heat up on the trade market in the NHL. Lepore, is there anything else you want to get off your chest before we wrap up this podcast?
I am very much looking forward to the Leafs' next run of games. They have, I think, 4 more at home before heading off for the All-Star break. The Rangers next. I know Hockey Night in Canada, or is it? Yeah, it is Saturday. They're playing Ottawa, right? And they have someone in between.
It's
Friday's
Ottawa.
A
weird schedule this week. They play Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. It's like all the days that they don't typically play.
Yeah, usually Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, but they're all at home. And I guess we ride Sammy because he still hasn't lost at home. Keep that undefeated streak going. Marner's point streak ended last night. This is going to sound super weird, but when Marner's point streak ended at the historical number it was at, and his home record ended last night, there's that part of me that thinks he's kind of happy about it. It's almost kind of a relief to get that out of your brain. It's got to affect you. People say, oh, they're professionals and they just play. And on the mic, he's going to say that, oh, no, I don't think about it at all. I'm just trying to win. But come on. every time the puck comes to your stick in the offensive zone, that thing's going to be in the back of your mind about that streak. So as happy as he is to have had a season like he's had and to put up those streaks, I think there is that thing inside of him that he's a little relieved. Samsonov's a goalie, so maybe it's a little different. Maybe he wants to, like I said before, give everyone the middle finger and go undefeated this year at home. But yeah, I mean, if he had that in the back of his head either, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, that's a great point. I really think that there's a lot of like mental strength that it takes to just stay on track. Like when Matthews was chasing 60 last year.
Yeah.
Marner setting the Leafs all-time record point streak that ended at 23 games. And now the home record point streak, which he also set at 19 games. I think it's also a good thing, like you said, just to put it in the rearview mirror, move on. I set these records, the streak's over. Let's now focus on what we set out to do at the beginning of the season, and that's win the Stanley Cup. So now we're going to see over these last 35 games if the Leafs can kick this into high gear, make a move or two at the deadline, and then see how the cards fall in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Very exciting times, Lepore, but also very nervous times.
Always.
All right, that is going to do it for episode 90 of the Gluttons For Punishment Podcast, or GFP, a Toronto Maple Leafs and NHL podcast hosted by Michael Lepore and Anthony Bruno. If you're a new listener or if you've been a longtime listener and you haven't done this already, this would be a big time help. If you give us a 5-star rating and review on either Apple or Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you're watching us on YouTube, we would appreciate it so much if you smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, and ring the notification bell so you know exactly when the GFP podcast is posting some new content. For Michael Lepore, I'm Anthony Bruno. Go Leafs, go, and we will see you in the next one.
Thanks, everyone.